What do we have here? I'm glad you asked. We have counters. We have a program for counters on the computer, and I've loaded it up to the PLC. So let's talk about counters. You'll notice right here in line 1, you'll notice CC1, and then line 2 will be DC1. Now these are both the same counter. It's C1, counter C1. It's just the counters in this program, basically if we don't have a DC1, the counter defaults to up counting. But if we do have a DC1, we can engage the decrease, and then every time we send a signal to the counter, it will decrease. So like I say, this is kind of a normally closed contact. Once I open it, we will no longer be decreasing, and we'll just by default be increasing. So that's your counters. Actually, it's the same counter. It's C1, counter 1. This contact is the C1 contact. So we preset our counter 1 to 6. So whenever we reach our preset count to 6, C1 will close, and I just did it where all 3 outputs will turn on, and 1C right here will just kind of reset the counter. This is a very simple program. We're just starting with counters, and we'll kind of add to this as we go on. So let's open this window here. As you can see, my C1 is preset to 6. So, of course, right now, if I just, if I produce an input, I'm not really going to get anything because it's trying to decrease, but it's already 0 and it doesn't decrease past 0. So I'll engage input 3, which opens our normally closed contact to the decrease function, which basically all we have now is our counter, default increase function. So every time I trip the input over here at my photo cell, it'll count up. And once it reaches 6, I'll get my outputs. I'll show you what I mean here. See, if you can zoom in, and if you can't, you can always see my inputs being engaged here when the I1 lights up. But anyway, if you can zoom in, you'll notice that count is 0. Okay, I engaged this photo sensor, and you'll notice I'm getting an input signal, and my count went up to 1. My computer lags behind. You'll have to forgive it, but you know this by now. So right now, we've engaged it again. We're up to 3. We've engaged it again. We're up to 4. We engage it again. We're up to 5. Let's just decrease before we show the output. So now I've closed by basically turning off this toggle switch. I've closed my normally closed contact. So now it should be decreasing every time you see this I1. Right now we're at 5. And we have 4. We have 3. So as you can see, based on the setting that I set with this toggle switch, I can either increase or decrease. Let's just go back to the normal increase function. And as you'll recall, I am at 3 right now. That's my setting. So 4, 5, 6. And should be no surprise. Since we hit our 6, we now have our outputs, and now I can reset it. So that's pretty much the counter function. My computer, of course, lags behind. So if you're watching my computer, sometimes I'll have outputs turn on before my computer registers, and you'll just have to forgive that. My output, my PLC is definitely faster than my computer. So we'll do the counter one more time. It's on 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Boom, there you go. As you can see, I just waved my hand in front of that photo sensor 6 times, and all 3 outputs are on. It's shown here. If you can see this line in red, it may not show up on the video, but you can see all 3 outputs are on. And I reset it, and the outputs turn off. So I'm going to load the next program, and we're going to kind of get into some more complex things, and we'll just kind of go from here. Okay, I've loaded the second counter program. Let me turn this output off just so that we can talk about this without that distraction. One thing you'll notice is we still have our counter C1 and our decrease. It's on the normally closed contact just like it was before. and we have our reset down here. But right here, you know, I've taken the 3 outputs and I basically split them up. So when our counter hits the preset value of 6, this C1 contact, you know, C1 contact, it'll close and we will get this output, which is the green light. But before then, we have a comparator here that is set to less than 0. So when we're less than 0, we have the red output, which is what you saw when I you know, turn the camera back on. So when we have less than 0, we have the red output. When we get greater than 0, this comparator changes. This contact opens, that one shuts. And so greater than 0, then we'll have the output 2, which is the white light. And then once we get to our final count of 6, we'll have the green light, and you can see C1 is normally closed here. So when this closes, this opens, and we will no longer have the white. So they're all interlocked, so we don't get more than one, basically. But this is just showing you the up counter, and we could do a down counter if you wanted, but I think you've got the idea of that. So this is just kind of showing the counter. Before we showed it as when you reach the final count, the output comes on. Now we're going to show you with these comparators, which, you know, you can do a lot of comparators and get all kinds of values in between 0 and when the final count is reached. So this is just showing the comparator. Okay, so I'm going to show you this one. As you can see, my output 3 is on. My output 3 is the red light. The reason why it's on is because my comparator is set to 0. But once I show you the output, oh, one second, I need to change that to where now I'm increasing. Okay, so now once I trip the photo sensor, we will get the first count. Let's open this window. So as you can see, here's my comparator. This is that C1 is greater than 0, which is that one. But here's my counter. It's preset to 6, so there's 6. So once I trip it, you notice the red light turned to white, and the Q3 turned to Q2. That means that basically I'm now at 1, and anytime I'm in between 1 and 6, so anytime I'm basically 1 to 5, we'll have the white light. So right now my count is 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll let my computer catch up. Okay, there we go. See, I've got to count at 4. Now I'm going to pause in front of it, and as you can see, my count is 5, and you know, I'm getting my input right, and I still have the white light. But when I get 6, boom, we got the green light. So as you can see, once I hit my preset value of 6, my counter, the contact closes, and now I have my final output. And as you can see, I can count higher than 6. You know, right now I'm at 10, but nothing else happens because I've already hit 6. So I can decrease, I can change this, and now I'm on my decrease. My value is 10, so we'll go 9, 8, 7, and of course my green light's still on because I'm still above 6. 6, my green light is still on. 5, I decreased to 5, so my green light stopped being on, my white light's on. Now I can go down to 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and I'm back down to the red light. I can reset it, and of course when I reset I'm at 0, so my red light's still on. Once again, I can increase my count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now I'm back up to the green light. And of course you can see in between, I had the white light. So this is an up and down counter with a comparator where we have the red when our value is 0. We have the white when it's 1 to 5, and then we have the green when we reach our final count of 6. So that kind of helps you to know how these comparators work and how you can get values. Yeah, I could add a lot more comparators to that. We can get values anywhere in between 0 and the final count, but that just kind of demonstrates how counters with comparators work. Now I'm going to pause this video and we'll load the next program. Okay, and this is basically the same program. I have just set my counter resets the count. A lot of times when you're counting things, you're only looking for a specific number. And like, for example, if you're packaging, maybe you're packaging Coke bottles in packages of 6 or 12 or 18, you're only looking for that number. And then, of course, once you hit your number, your arm comes over, grabs them, and you kind of go to the next phase of the packaging. And you want your counter to reset so that it can start counting the next cycle. And so a lot of times counters are reset when they hit their final amount. So once again, we're using counter C1. This is a decreasing counter. I've opened it, so that's why you see your I3 on, because the function is open, so we're going to be increasing. Now, I have set this increasing counter. You'll notice the contact for C1 goes to a timer. So I set my timer function for like 5 seconds, and that's going to basically, my timer 1 will close, and this is an off delay timer. So, you know, once my count reaches 6, my timer will turn on. It'll engage the output, and after 5 seconds, that output will turn off. But when my counter engages my output, my counter also resets. See that RC1, it resets counter 1, so that during the time whenever the motor is on to show the next phase of you know, the packaging or whatever we're doing, if other items pass by that photo sensor, we can still keep counting, and then we'll, you know, reach our count, and once again the process will get, you know, initiated. So I'm gonna show this. My I1 is up here, so we'll just go. Let's open up the window so you can see. There you can see the second line is the timer. It's at 0 and it's preset for 6. The counter's up here. You can look at that if you want, but I think we looked at timers last time, so you pretty much know how a timer goes. So let's just show the program, right? I1, I'm tripping off the sensor. You can tell that we have an input, and our count is 1. Once again, I trip off the sensor, and our count is 2. So once we get to 3, 4, 5, well, I was off on my count, but anyway, we hit 6. So now our output is on, and it was 5 seconds, then it turns off. Now you'll also notice that C1 reset. I just had basically tripped it off again after our 6 had been caught. So we're at 1 right now. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You'll notice my count went back to 0, so it did reset, and my output came on, and then it went off after 5 seconds. My count is at 0, so once again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you'll notice I don't have to press any kind of reset button or anything. The counter resets itself, and it, you know, basically when the counter reaches the value of 6, it produces an output, and then it resets itself so that it can get ready for the next output. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's producing an output, but watch this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now 6, and boom, we're back to it. We're back to the output. So as you can see, even though the output is on, the counter resets and it keeps counting for the next output. Okay, so I'm going to pause this, and I'm going to load the last demonstration for this Schneider Zilla logic counters, and we'll kind of see that it can get a little bit more complex and other things can be added. Okay, so you can see here I've put together another program. This is a function block diagram program. It's a little bit different than the ladder diagrams you've been seeing. One thing about function block diagram is we can get more complex programs in. So once we kind of get a little bit more complex than the one-liners, a lot of times I do function block diagram because it's just easier to get more complex programs in. So right here, as you can see, we really only have 5 inputs and 3 outputs, and already, as you can see over the simple things that I showed you before, this looks a lot more complex. Now, it's not quite as complex as you look if we can just kind of digest it piece by piece. What we'll notice is input 1 is this photo sensor. It just does the up count. Input 2 does the down count. So no longer do we have to do our setting with the toggle switch, but we can just have 2 different photo sensors. One does an up count, one does a down count. So say if one of the things that's important is that we only have X amount of items in an area, maybe to keep things from getting congested or something, we can always monitor the incoming and the outgoing and see how much of a count we have in an area, and then we can adjust our feeds or whatever from there. So one thing that we have that we didn't see before is the up count and down count being separate without having to do the selector switch. That's kind of nice. So we have our up count and our down count going to our counter, yes. And then we also see this num, which is number, and I've set it at 3 count. You can tell because I've made the note of 3 count. So now this sets our counter to 3 count. And so once we hit 3, what I put here is a timer, a cycling timer. Every 5 seconds it cycles and sends a signal, and 1 signal will go to each counter. And so at 1 signal it'll trip this counter, at 2 signals it'll trip this counter, 3, 4, 5. And what this does is this sets up stations so you can see you can see kind of a process that's sequential, I guess you can say. Now this you'll probably never see in the real world. I've just kind of set it up to show you, first of all, that you can link counters and timers together to work together, but second of all, just to show you a visual of really once you trip a certain count, a lot of times you'll have kind of a process that's not just one output, but it's kind of one output, and then when that output's finished, it'll start another output, and then when that's finished, it'll start another, and so it'll kind of do a sequential kind of function. It's kind of like if you were to get 6, if you're packaging packages of 6 Coke cans or something, once you hit 6, maybe the arm comes over and grabs the 6, puts it on a conveyor, and then the second step, the conveyor will take it down the line to maybe the machine that puts the little plastic collar around it, and then once that's done, it'll take it down the line to a heater where it shrinks that collar, things like that. So when I think of numbers, I think of packaging because we're looking for specific amounts. But once again, so we have our up counts, our down counts, and then we trip off our sequential program. Another thing that I have is, of course, a reset, which is our 1C button, which would be here. This would be our reset. Now here, this 1D and 1E, I've kind of set this up to simulate a remote override. Like, you wouldn't necessarily have to hook up 1D or 1E to the PLC itself, but you could have a remote override so that if there's something wrong with a sensor or something wrong with the process, a supervisor could always remotely override it so that you could keep producing your product until it gets fixed. And of course, as you'll see, once we can kind of tell what's going on with this program, you can kind of see it could easily be supervised. Someone from a desk in an office can see where we're at with the process. So once this gets done with the process, we'll just kind of show you the demonstration. Okay, so now we've reset. So our up count is set to 3. 1, 2, 3. And we're at station 1 right now. Now we're at station 2. Now we're at station 3, and that just models sequences of outputs. Now we're at station 4 with all 3 of them going, and then station 5 will be a reset. Like I say, those different stations, they just model sequences of outputs, because usually outputs aren't as simple as what we've seen. So I wanted that to get in your brain, that there would, a lot of times be a sequence. Now, if something goes wrong with, in the production line, we could always override it. Maybe a supervisor's in an office and he pulls up the program and he says, you know what? We have a sensor that's out. Our sensor just isn't picking up. Well, heck, let's just force close it. All right. So there you go. See, I just kind of forced it. And like you saw, I didn't even trip the physical, photo sensor. I just kind of forced it from the computer. And then let's just say we have the process going. 1, 2, 3. We have the process going, and for whatever reason they can't stop it. Well, you could easily remotely just say, you know what? Let's stop it. There you go. I just stopped it. So this kind of models how someone remotely can hook up to this via, the internet, and basically you can monitor it. You can force a process to start or stop or whatever. And of course, the rest of this just demonstrated our counters and how our counters can be linked to our timers, and it showed kind of how we could have some sequential processes based on that. Okay, so the next video we're going to talk about counters with regard to Allen Bradley and Delta.